welcome to EMDR Interventions for Recent Trauma Recovery with Dr. Laurel Parnell. We're so happy to have you join us for this incredible training event. My name is Ryan Malsky. I'm a digital strategist and CE training developer here at Psychotherapy Networker, and I'll be your host and moderator for today's training. It's an honor to have you join us. This is a unique workshop in that this one was truly developed in response to questions from your colleagues, to requests for help from your colleagues for the challenging issues that are going on, the wars, disasters, other traumatic events. It's an honor as we're partnering with Dr. Laurel Parnell to be able to bring this training to thousands of therapists around the world to really help with some of the difficult crises. So thank you for joining us today. Here's the plan. Here's how this workshop will go today. So in a moment, I'm going to welcome Dr. Laurel Parnell to join us, and we're all going to be together here until 3 p.m. Central Time, 1 p.m. Pacific Time. We'll put the full schedule, including a 15-minute break that's going to happen around 1 p.m. Central Time. That will all be available to you in the chat. Given the number of folks who signed up for this event, we're going to have cameras and mics off, but I will be here as your voice to help interact with our speaker. So if you have questions that you want to ask, you can add them to the Q&A feature that will appear down below in your Zoom banner in just a few moments into the session. I'll do my best during the time that we have Q&A sessions that we have to go through as many as we can. I ask that you please look through the Q&A, upvote the questions that you like, and that will help us prioritize when the time comes. Just a reminder, the 14-day archive access will be available to you in the portal. And the chat will generally be open for tech questions. However, there will be some demonstration time that Laurel will be working through where we will open up the chat for your feedback at those times. So keep an eye out for those. If you're having any issues hearing or seeing us, please check out the FAQ section where we have plenty of guidance for you. Or if you need, feel free to chat. Myself and my colleague Tim will do our best to help you. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Laurel Parnell. She's the developer of attachment-focused EMDR, the director of the Parnell Institute, and one of the world's premier EMDR innovators. And also joining us today, we're going to have her colleague, who will be on shortly, is Julie Probish-Shad from the Parnell Institute. She's going to help us as well. So with that, please welcome Dr. Laurel Parnell. Thank you, Laurel, for joining us.
Hi, it's my pleasure to be here, and I'm so happy to be able to share with you some of what we've learned over the years in ways to help people with recent traumas. So this is weird. I've got little balloons and hearts coming out here. So there's been so many terrible things that have been happening in the world that break my heart and that make us feel powerless. Like, what can we do? There are things that are happening due to climate change. Where I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, we've had fires, we have earthquakes. In other parts of the country, in the US, we have hurricanes and tornadoes and other climate-related disasters that are happening. And then we have all the school shootings and then wars. It just goes on and on. And what we found is that we have some very simple, easy to use things you can do right away. And I've wanted to share them with a broader audience for quite a while. And these simple things I'm going to be teaching you today can be used right away. By the time you leave this webinar, you will have tools you will be able to use. So I'm going to move to my slides. Okay. So what I'm going to be talking about are EMDR interventions for recent trauma and recovery and ways people respond to traumas and how we can help them. So the kind of traumatic events we've had are things like the wars in Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, school shootings, terrorist attacks, fires in Maui, California, Canada, and others, hurricanes. Oh my gosh, the people in Florida have been hit by these major hurricanes. And then, of course, North Carolina, And the other areas in the Eastern US, COVID pandemic, so many big traumas related to that, accidents, traumatic losses, and other climate-related traumas and other traumatic experiences. So really, instead of feeling powerless, what can we do? There are actual things that we can do. So psychological first aid. Although no intervention model has been proved to be efficacious for those individuals who encounter mass trauma, like natural disasters, terrorist attacks, in most part attributable to the difficulty evaluating interventions in the immediate post-disaster context. The use of psychological first aid may be beneficial. So, for example, we don't, somebody has a disaster, we don't go out there and do research on them. That would feel, it's like, and you don't like waiting for a natural disaster and go out there and do pre and post research. It's hard to do that. But we know from experience, there's certain things that can help right away. So in applying psychological first aid, experts recommend inclusion of the following evidence-informed intervention components. And these are the things you want to keep in mind, are the things that really are important. So we want to promote a sense of safety. So how do we really help people drop into themselves and feel safe, even though they've been through something that felt very unsafe? We want to use techniques to promote calming, right? We want to capitalize on a sense of self-efficacy and community efficacy. So this is the sense of connecting and what can we do? These things make a difference. We want to encourage connectedness and we want to encourage hope. So these are all elements that are important. So experts note the limitations in empirical evidence supporting the implementation of these principles of psychological first aid, but suggest including these principles based on a review of current evidence on the prevention and treatment of trauma. And one of the things we want to think about is that a person can have a traumatic experience, but that traumatic experience doesn't necessarily mean they've been traumatized by it, meaning that they continue to have symptoms of trauma that turn into PTSD. So, and a lot of it has to do with what happens after the traumatic experience. So if you've had, like a child has been really terrified by something, and then right away, a parent is there to hold the child, comfort the child, soothe the child, it's not going to lodge in their nervous system necessarily as a traumatic experience. It'll just be a scary thing that happened, and then I was calmed. So what happens after the scary experience or the traumatic experience has a lot to do with how it ends up affecting the individual. So the basic principles of intervention after emotional trauma include the following. So we want to reduce stress. How do we reduce stress after the person has had a very traumatic experience? We want to ensure that the survivors have a safe environment. One of the things that really stood out for me after 9/11 was that people wanted to get to safety. So it's getting to safety, and then they have a safe environment, and then we can work with them in some way. So that's part of it. Promote contact with loved ones and other sources of support. This is important. These hugs, this connection really help it not turn into PTSD. Support self-esteem. Help patients understand that their reaction to the trauma is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation, not a sign of weakness or psychopathology. So we don't want to pathologize people who are really shaken by a really frightening experience. We want to, that you're shaking, that you're having nightmares, that you're having a hard time, moving through this. It's not a sign that there's something wrong with you. This is a normal response to a very frightening experience. So normalize it. Reassure and help survivors concerning immediate needs, such as rest, food, shelter, social supports, or a sense of belonging to a community. Some feel cut off and detached. This is an interesting piece of this feeling of being detached. I'm an expert in EMDR, and I've been using EMDR for well over 30 years. And what's been very interesting is in processing with EMDR a severe traumatic event, the person before EMDR will describe what they've been through as if there was nobody there to help them. And then as they're processing with the bilateral stimulation, they start remembering that there were people to hold them and calm them and soothe them and help them. But there was something about the experience itself. I think it's how trauma lands in us, that we go into our own kind of echo chamber of isolation, and it feels like we're all alone, even though we're connected to other people. So I think the more that we can kind of emphasize that and use our voices and calm people down and let them know that they're not alone, that this is a way to really help them after a frightening experience. And then promote coping mechanisms that are helpful to them. Some more on basic principles of intervention after emotional trauma include the following. Avoid increasing stress. Avoid promoting discussion of issues that cannot be resolved. Avoid abreaction in groups and the resulting contagion effect. Now, for years, people have been getting debriefed in group situations, and it's always bothered me because I'll hear, as an EMDR therapist, how much more traumatized an individual is because of the group debriefing. So, for example, if the person you're working with was involved in a shooting situation where they weren't shot, but somebody else was, or somebody else saw something horrible, and then they're in a group debriefing and they're hearing about everybody else's trauma, now they've got more horrible images in their mind. They've taken in the energy and the trauma of the person next to them that's just reported something, crying and shaking and distressed. So they had their own experience of it, but now it's amplified the trauma. They're calling this trauma contagion, and it makes total sense that you don't want to be with a group of people who are very traumatized talking about what their trauma is, because it makes it worse, not better. Respect defenses and do not force reality on people who can't handle it yet. So this is where some people, they just want to calm down. They don't want to hear all this information, and it's not helpful to them in terms of healing. And keep in mind that debriefing can be harmful. Making people talk about it, think about it, relive it can actually make it worse, not better. Discuss the experience with clients who want to talk about it, and avoid pressuring those who do not wish to discuss it. And this is what I'm going to be talking about in just a little bit, that some people really do want to talk about it and they need to talk about it. So yeah, let them do that, but don't push somebody to talk about something if this isn't something they want to be doing. That actually can be traumatizing to them. So with trauma first aid, there are things you can do to help right away. And some of the information that I'm going to be sharing with you are in two of my books. One of them is called Tapping In. It's published by Sounds True, and it has many of these methods. And the other is A Therapist's Guide to EMDR. And these are the books that have much of the information that I will be presenting. A Therapist's Guide to EMDR, Rewiring the Addicted Brain with EMDR-based treatment, and Tapping In. So here's my big generalization about what I've seen in clinical practice over the years in terms of how people respond to trauma. There seem to be two ways. One, I call the cat under the bed people. And the other are the can't stop talking about it people. So they really fall into two distinct categories. So I'm going to start with the cat under the bed people. So the cat under the bed people don't want to talk about it. They don't even want to think about what happened. They just want to calm down and put the terrible thing aside. It can feel re-traumatizing to them to make them talk about it. And I call them the cat under the bed people. There's a cat under a bed. If you've ever had a cat, you know what I'm talking about. The cat under the bed, people, when a cat is frightened or injured, it will hide under the bed or in a closet. It will stay there until it feels strong enough to come out. You don't want to drag a cat from where it's hiding to heal. Can you imagine dragging a cat out? You got to deal with this cat. It will distress the cat and it may scratch you. It'll be really angry at you. And the cat will come out when it's ready to come out. And I've seen this, if you've had a cat who's been scared by a raccoon or something is terrified it or it's injured, it goes into the far dark corner under the bed, or it'll go into a closet and hide in the far back part of the closet. And it will stay there until it's ready to come out. And then it will come out. And then, it's not a traumatized cat anymore. It's dealt with it. So in the same way, we don't drag a cat out from under a bed when it's injured or frightened. We don't do that to a human who is distressed and wants to calm down. We want to help the person settle their sympathetic nervous system and feel safe in their own bodies. Don't make them talk about it if they don't want to or are not ready to. And don't debrief people in groups. This can infect them with the traumas of others and make things worse for them. After the terror attacks on 9/11, many people just wanted to get home to hug their kids and reach safety. There's a photo I've seen multiple times of large groups of people crossing the bridge to get home. And that was the image that is kind of in my mind. And also having worked with people after 9/11 with EMDR, they just wanted to go home. They just wanted to settle down. They didn't want to talk about it until they were ready to deal with it, with any symptoms that they still had afterwards. But they needed to just settle down. They needed to calm down. They didn't need to be in that huge trauma vortex where it's getting worse and worse and worse. They just needed to hug a family member. So, resource tapping for cat under the bed people. It's an EMDR-based technique that uses short sets of bilateral stimulation to link a positive resilience-building resource with a broader neural network. It was developed from EMDR, but I've expanded the use of it and wrote about it in my book, Tapping In, for self-help. And there are many applications, but it's great for anxiety and distress reduction. So I'm going to do a quick definition of what I call resource tapping and EMDR, just to give you an idea of the difference between these two things. So with traditional EMDR, which we use for trauma, we activate the memory network where the trauma is stored. So we light it up. So let's say somebody saw a shooting and they're having nightmares and flashbacks. We'd say, when you think of that incident, what picture represents the worst part? It's hearing the bullets. I'm in a big auditorium. I'm diving under a seat. What emotions do you feel? I feel terrified. It's, what do you notice in your body? My body's activated. I feel sick to my stomach. My heart's racing. I'm sweating. What negative belief to have about yourself? I'm going to die. 0 to 10, it's a 10. And then we start the bilateral simulation. So what we're referring to as bilateral simulation is alternating bilateral simulation. So it can be tapping on either shoulder. It can be auditory, where there's sounds that are going back and forth, back and forth. It can be tapping on the sides of the legs. It can be anything that activates both sides of the body, which is activating both sides of the brain, which sets off a rapid processing effect. So it allows this mind and body to begin to very rapidly move the information from dysfunctional to functional, from highly distressed to the emotional distress goes down. So we've lit up this memory network. We've begun the bilateral simulation. By the way, it was begun with eye movements with Francine Shapiro. But many people don't like eye movement. It's not comfortable for their eyes. They have a hard time holding imagery as they're moving their eyes back and forth. So we've moved beyond eye movements to other forms of bilateral simulation. So So we light up the memory network where the trauma is stored. We add this bilateral stimulation. It sets off a rapid processing effect. So thoughts, feelings, and body sensations start to rapidly move through the system. And we, from time to time, we bring them back to what we call the target, the memory they began with. We check it. We begin again. By the end of the session, the distress has gone down. And then we do what we call the installation of the positive cognition. There's a new view. What do you believe about yourself? I survived, or I'm powerful. And then we scan the body. So that's what we do with EMDR. So EMDR is a trauma therapy that we use by targeting the trauma, directly, and then we're using bilateral stimulation. Well, what we found is that we needed to prepare people before doing EMDR and really help strengthen them before we go into the trauma networks. And so Shapiro, in the early days, used what she called safe place. So can you imagine a safe place, a place that, where you feel safe? It could be, a lake, an ocean. It could be someplace where you can calm your nervous system down. And then the person imagines the safe place, and then short amounts of bilateral stimulation are used. Now, one of the problems with safe place is that a very traumatized person can't find safe. The word safe is actually a triggering word. And so as soon as you say safe, they think unsafe, or they can't find it. And we'll be talking about that in just a little bit. So I've shifted it to using other words that are helping us cultivate the same kinds of ideas, the same kinds of states inside. So I'll use peaceful or calm or happy place or something that will help the nervous system calm down. So what we do with resource tapping, instead of focusing on the trauma, we're looking for a resilience building resource that we can strengthen. So it seems that when you light up something you're wanting to strengthen and cultivate more of, and you're using imagination, you're lighting up those neural networks inside. And then when we add short amount of bilateral stimulation, it seems to link the resource in. So I think of it as light it up, whatever it is you're wanting to develop more of through the use of imagination, light it up and then link it up. So we're using short amount. So it's instead of long sets of bilateral stimulation, we're using short ones in a very controlled way. So we'll imagine the resource you want to cultivate with the picture, emotions, body sensations, and any other sensory information that will help to activate the felt sense of the resource. When the resource is well activated, you can feel it. You add bilateral stimulation. This can be tapping on the sides of your legs, crossing your arms and tapping either shoulder, tapping your feet, or using auditory stimulation. You could even use eye movements if you want to use eye movements. Most people are not so comfortable using eye movements, but if whoever you're working with wants to use eye movements, you can use those also. But be careful that it doesn't set them into the processing. So you want to keep it short. So you can tap, if you're going right, left, 6 to 12 times, right, left. Then stop and check in. If the resource is continuing to strengthen, you can tap longer. Now, we came up with this number of 6 to 12 because it's kind of arbitrary. We're just trying to keep it only on the positive. What we don't want is for the person to then start into that processing where they're going into the trauma networks. We want to keep it only on the positive. So we say tap as long as it's strengthening and feels positive. So let's say you start 6 to 12, you imagine a place that on a lake and it feels really peaceful and you're feeling really good, and you tap 6 to 12 times, but you're just getting into it and you're feeling it. When you stop and you go, okay, well, you can go longer. So tap as long as it feels positive. Stop immediately if it should go negative. So it could be, negative could be something like remembering that so it was, let's say it was a cabin on a lake that you really loved going to as a child, and that you're remembering that the family had to sell it and it's no longer there anymore, and then grief comes up. So if grief comes up, stop the bilateral stimulation, go back and see if you can reactivate it in a fully positive way. So I'll be going through the directions in a little bit more detail in a bit. So these are some of the resources that we use the most commonly for calming the nervous system down. Peaceful place, nurturing figures, protector figures, spiritual or wise figures, images from nature, love resources, and then what resources would calm you down. So these are what we call the 4 foundational resources, and these are what we use in attachment-focused EMDR. It's a peaceful place. It's a place that's peaceful and calm, very easily calms the nervous system down. Nurturing figures. These are figures, real or imaginary, that have a nurturing quality. They're figures that are compassionate and kind and caring. They kind of have those qualities of connection and attachment, if you want, like arms that can hold and comfort a person. Protector figures. These are figures that are fiercer, that have that energy of protection. And then wise or spiritual figures have that sense of wisdom that can provide information or guidance to an individual. So these are what we call the 4 foundational resources that we use in attachment-focused EMDR. We use them to prepare people for the trauma processing work, but these are wonderful for emotional regulation and use after a traumatic experience. So the peaceful place. This is a place, real or imaginary. It can be used to create a sense of calm for the nervous system. You can help the client find this place through the use of relaxation and guided imagery. Now, everything I'm going to be talking about, you can use for yourself, and you can also teach your client to use for themselves. And you can be the one doing it with your client. So I'll be going back and forth with this. So if you're working with an individual, you can set up the type of bilateral stimulation they're going to use. And they can either self-tap, or you can tap them, or you can use a device of some kind. Many people, if you're working with this trauma first aid, they're going to be tapping themselves. So you can show them, you want to cross your arms and tap either shoulder. You want to tap the sides of your legs. Do you want to tap your feet? Some people will squeeze things like little squeeze balls, or holding a rock or something. Anything that is getting them to activate both sides of their body. And people have gotten very creative with this, in terms of what helps them do this. So if you're working with somebody, we want to start with what kind of bilateral stimulation are we going to use, what's comfortable for you, and then guide them in this. If you're doing this for yourself, you will know what you like, what kind of bilateral stimulation, and then you'll do the imagery. So the peaceful place is one of the easiest ones. It can be a place that's real or imaginary, and it can be a place they've been to before. Some people will need more help getting to a peaceful place. They'll need more guidance. So in order to do that, you may need to help them slow their breathing down, imagine going down some steps, slowly. With each step, you're getting more relaxed. And then at the last step, you're going to find your peaceful place. So sometimes you need to do a little bit more that's guided imagery, maybe a little light hypnosis to get them into this place if they're in an activated state. But way you can go, you can close your eyes and go inside. Do some deep, slow breathing, or another method to calm yourself and come to the present moment. Now that you're relaxed, imagine a place where you feel peaceful, a place where you feel relaxed, comfortable, and at ease. If you need any help connecting with it, you can enhance it using your senses. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you feel? What sensations do you feel on your skin? When you have a strong positive feeling of this place and you feel relaxed and at ease, begin the bilateral stimulation. And continue the bilateral stimulation as long as it feels positive and continues to strengthen. Stop when you feel that it is well established. If you feel distress or experience the intrusion of negative imagery, stop tapping immediately. Though for many people, the bilateral stimulation works quite well to increase the positive feeling and imagery more securely. For some people, the bilateral stimulation opens up processing of distressing material. If this happens, stop the BLS and explore with your client what they're experiencing. You may need to develop a new peaceful place using imagery only, or work to create changes in the peaceful place that make it more secure. So ways to do that, for example, might be, would you like to imagine a protective barrier surrounding the place? Do you want to bring in guardians, imaginary guardians to guard it so that you can relax in this place? Some people who've been through trauma, letting their guard down immediately may actually make them feel less safe. So maybe starting with one of the other resources may be what works better for them. So the peaceful place can be a sacred place or a sanctuary. It can be like a place that has a sense of sacredness. One woman, it was Chaco Canyon, which is a beautiful sacred place in the Southwest. It could be a sanctuary. Maybe it was a meditation hall they were in. It can even be an activity they enjoy doing. So it could be skiing, doing something, playing an instrument, singing in a choir, running. For some people, as I said, it can make them feel unsafe to do the peaceful place as it lowers their defenses. You can add a protective barrier or bring in guardians or protectors. For some people, starting with the protector figures may be a better way to go. So these are typical examples of peaceful place. A lot of people pick beaches, whether they've been to a beach or not, just imagining a beach. But if they imagine a beach, then you can help enhance it by saying, okay, so as you're in this beach, do you have your shoes off? Do you feel the sand? What's the temperature of the water? What's the temperature of the air? Is there a breeze? What are you noticing? What are you smelling? Salty air. What are you hearing? The sound of the waves. So sometimes adding the sensory information can enhance it and make it stronger. There's another example of a peaceful place, a beautiful lake up in the mountains. It can be autumn, as we're coming into autumn now in the United States. The sense of autumn and the crispness of the air and the leaves, the light on the leaves, things like that can enhance it. So I am going to go back here and I'm going to guide you in finding a peaceful place. So what I want to invite you to do is to close your eyes and go inside. Find yourself a comfortable place where you won't be disturbed. Just feel yourself sitting. If your energy is scattered, just invite your energy to come back to yourself. Come back into your body. Feel yourself sitting. Notice your breath. Maybe take a deep, deep breath, filling up your belly, your chest, and your throat. And then as you exhale, slow exhalation, releasing the air back into the earth. Relaxing with the exhalation. Let's do another. Take a deep breath. Imagine taking the air up through your legs, filling up your belly, your chest, your throat. And then with the exhalation, just relax and release. Coming to the present moment. Now imagine a place where you feel peaceful, a place where you feel relaxed and at ease. It can be a place you've been to before or a place that you create in your imagination. Just let it come to you. As you're in this place, notice what you see, look around. What do you hear? You notice any smells, any scents? What sensations do you feel on your skin? When you have a strong, positive feeling of this place, you feel relaxed and at ease, begin the bilateral stimulation. So you can tap your sides of your legs, you can tap either shoulder, you can squeeze something right, left, but you're just going both sides of your body, right, left, and do this for about 6 to 12, right, left, 6 to 12 times. As long as it's feeling positive and continues to strengthen. And just keep tapping until it feels like it's enough. If you feel distress or experience any intrusion of negative imagery, stop tapping immediately. So when you feel like it's enough, you stop tapping and then check up inside, see how you're doing. So why don't we take any questions, anything you want to share from this experience, and I'll answer them now. You can put this in the chat.
All right. Yeah, quite a few questions. We had a very engaged audience today. So I think we'll go ahead and ask a few of the questions that have come in while you're doing the process. Is that okay?
Okay, great. Yes.
Sounds good. Okay, just over here. Let's see. One of the most popular had to do with cat under the bed people. What happens if cat under the bed people refuse to ever talk about the traumatic experience and end up forgetting? Is it suppression or is it just their way of recovering?
Why do you need to talk about it if the person is functioning well? So I think this is really our question. You know, we have this idea, and I think it's our training as therapists is you got to talk about it. So I'm always looking at how is the person functioning? If the traumatic event is not, they're not having nightmares, flashbacks, is not impacting their behavior, their life, why would they need to talk about it? If they feel okay, and they've moved on with their life and it's taken its place as something that's happened to them, they don't ever have to talk about it. If calming down, connecting, feeling loved and safe afterwards has taken care of it, what's the point of talking about it? Unless the person has symptoms that need addressing. And then maybe they need something. But what we want to remember is often talking about something actually can make it worse because it's not helping them access and process where the trauma is stored. So if you remember, I want to recommend The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk's book, of course. Trauma stored on the right side of the brain, and trauma stored in this fragmented way, and the language center of the brain is disconnected. So if we're depending on language, it's lighting it up without processing it. So what we get with EMDR, if somebody has symptoms that have continued with EMDR, then we can target and reprocess those traumas, and then they move them out where it's not language dependent. They don't have to keep talking about it. So there are ways that talking can help, and we'll be the second half of our work here. We'll be talking about what we call tapping through the trauma for the people who can't stop talking about it. Okay.
Thank you for that. And just for the audience here, kind of a little clarification on the functionality. So the Q&A, if you have questions that you've formalized, like we just referenced here, please use the Q&A feature. The chat will be more for responses back. How'd you feel about that process? What things kind of come up? So more for that type of feedback. So questions, please use the Q&A feature, and we'll continue to use that to pose them during the training here. Next question had to do, does the pace of resource tapping matter? I've had a few questions on that, as far as pacing goes.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And my answer to that is the pace should be what the individual likes. We all have different preferences as far as rhythm. And some people like faster tapping, some people like slower. If they're tapping themselves, they'll just set the pace that they like. If you're tapping the person, like you're tapping their knees, for example, you ask, what pace do you like? Do you want me to go? You just tell me let's set the pace that feels comfortable for the individual. Typically, people like a slower pace for resourcing, and they like faster for processing traumas. But I always say, because I'm attachment focused, it's what the individual prefers. So ask them, what do you like? Whatever, just set the pace that feels right for your nervous system.
Cool. I had a question on the evidence base for tapping strategies. Is tapping alone evidence-based, or do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, what's interesting is one of my colleagues' students, if you want, has done research in Singapore on attachment-focused EMDR, including the resourcing part of it. And she got highly significant results with just doing the resourcing for people with early childhood trauma. So she got significant results with that, and then even more, better results as she added in the EMDR part. So I don't know if we have that, but we have so much clinical evidence of the support for how this is able to really calm the nervous system down.
It's helpful. His question, how do you identify resources and do preparatory work with those who cannot come up with things that make them happy, nurturing protector figures, find it harder when blocked when invited to imagine?
Yeah, so what I know, unless somebody is severely clinically depressed, that's a group of people who have a very hard time connecting to anything positive at all. I cast my net wide, and I always find something. It can be ordinary activities. So, for example, a man I was working with who was so severely traumatized, he'd had, so many adult traumas. He couldn't calm down with the typical resources. So what I found is doing an ordinary activity he enjoyed doing, worked super well for him. So for him, it was like hitting golf balls on a driving range. That worked. That settled his nervous system down. And then another was love. I knew that he loved his children, and love is an antidote to fear. If you're feeling love, you're not feeling fear at the same time. So I directed him to bring his awareness into his heart and think of his daughter, his young daughter. And as he thought of her and the love he had for her, he could feel it in his heart. And then we tapped that in. and it settled him down. And we did the same thing of your son and the love he had for his son. You could feel it in his heart, and then we tap that in. So love resources are really good if they can connect. So I'm always looking at what are the kinds of things that are easy for the person to access that will calm them down. And sometimes it's an activity. I think for young people, sitting quietly on a beach is like not a good thing. But riding their bike or doing some kind of skiing or playing music with a group or something like that can settle them down and make them feel good. So I'm looking at what are the kinds of things we can find. And there's a way in which this is a co-creative process that the therapist does with the client, knowing that our imagination is limitless and that we can offer ideas. And the more you do this and you work with different people, different things are going to work with different people. So you try, well, what about this? What about that? Have you ever seen this? Have you ever done that? And they'll say, no, no, no. Oh, but that gives me this idea. And then that will spur them to come up with something. And then you try to, sometimes for people, it's like their bed. They've got a cozy bed, or it's just remembering a really great hug they had from somebody. And then they just remember that hug, and then they can tap that in.
Mhm. That's good. This one's related. So I think the second part will bring us a little different direction. Commenting on working with persons who have difficulty generating internal images, which I spoke a bit to, but that also have difficulties feeling their own body.
Yeah. So it's a good point. And a lot of people have that, especially if they've had a really scary experience. Sometimes, okay, so for the imagery part, I'm not a person who visualizes very well. There's some people who are amazing. You say, imagine something, and they get all kinds of colors and shapes and details, and I'm in awe of them. But you can use the word imagine, which isn't dependent on the imagery, seeing things so much, imagine. You can also say think of. And one of the things I'll say is we live in our imaginations all the time. For example, when you're worrying about the past, you're creating images in your mind that are activating your nervous system. You're worrying about such and such, or you're projecting into the future and you're creating mind pictures that maybe aren't really filled out well, but you're still creating mind pictures that are making you distressed. So we're hardly living in the present at all because we're constantly projecting backwards or forwards. So that's an example of it. And then I'll say that one way to do this is I'll use the example of a lemon. And I'll say, close your eyes, go inside. Now imagine or think of, imagine or think of a lemon. And it's bright yellow and it's super tart, very, very sour lemon. Now you cut the lemon in half, you cut it in quarters, and it's so juicy. And then you bring it up to your mouth and you take a bite out of that lemon and the juice squirts into your mouth. It's super sour. Now notice what your mouth is doing. Most people they'll find a puckering, they'll maybe be salivating more. They're having a somatic reaction to that imagery. And that's an example of it. This is the kind of thing we're doing constantly as we're imagining some bad thing happening in the future that's activating our nervous system, or we're worrying about something that we've done or something that's happened to us. We have these kind of pictures that we're creating. Maybe they're under our conscious mind. So, and then athletes also are using imagery for peak performance. They're imagining going down that ski slope, and skaters are imagining their best skating performance, and they're recalling how that felt in their bodies. But you're right, for some people, it's very difficult to connect to their bodies, and I think they need more help getting there, feeling their seat, doing some of this breathing to help them land in their bodies. And this is where somatic therapies have lots of different ideas of how to help people get in their bodies. I think sometimes with the resourcing, a person can stand up and take the shape or the form of the resource, especially not the peaceful place, obviously, but with the nurturing or the protective, they can physically enact it.
Mhm.
You know, what's kind of the, with a protector, what would your body be doing? You know,
Mhm.
it'd be doing like this or some stance. We'll take the stance. And then that can help them get into their bodies that really are enacting that feeling state that is connected to the resource that they're working with.
That's helpful. A number of questions around the actual procedural of tapping. So, the specifics. So some questions around, 6 taps. Is it 3 sets, right, left? Is it right hand to left knee? Like really around the
Yeah.
procedural side of tapping. Can you talk to that a bit?
Yeah, great. These are great. I'm so glad we can clarify this. So here's one way to tap. Just tap either shoulder, or if you're doing your legs, you can tap on the top of your knees or the sides of your knees like this, whatever the person wants. So I'll do it like this just so you could see it. So 6 to 12 would be like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like just like this.
Mhm.
So the idea is you have typically close your eyes, go inside. Really activate the resource as strongly as you can. So let's say it's a beach. Imagine you're at this beach that you really love. Let's say it's on Maui, Hawaii,
Mhm.
and they've chosen a beach with really soft sand, and the temperature of the water is warm, and there's a nice kind of salty breeze, and there's palm trees, and maybe their families, somebody they love and care for is there with them. They don't have to be alone. And maybe they're walking on the beach, and now they're lying in the water. Maybe they're floating, really feeling the sea holding them and this kind of warm embrace of the water. Or maybe they're snorkeling and they're seeing the beautiful fish and the warmth of the water. So they can kind of drop into an active imagination where it's filling in more and more of a positive memory or just a sense of being in this place if they've had that. And then when they have a good felt, I say good felt sense of the resource, and they have the sense of calming, then you start to tap. And the thing is, some people, you tap just a little bit and that's enough. They tap a little bit too much. They're remembering, oh yeah, then there was a terrible fire in Maui. I can't go there anymore. It's like, oh, can't use that one. Let's think of another place that's doesn't have a contaminant. Oh yeah, there's another beach I really like to. There was a lake I went to as a kid that I really liked to. So maybe you need to find another peaceful place because the one that you started with, now there's bad memories. But you've also learned that the person starts the free associative processing after a very short amount of bilateral stimulation. So you got to keep it even shorter. So the instruction is, if it should go negative at all, signal me, we stop. Or if they're tapping themselves, you stop right away. And then what's happened? Oh, it's bringing up sad memories. I can't go there anymore. Okay. Do you think we can go back to this one and make it fully positive, or do we need to find a different place? And they'll tell you. So it's this back and forth with the person you're working with. Oh, it's making me too sad. I can't do that anymore. Okay. So let's think of another one that's fully positive for you. And then they come up with another one. Or the peaceful place makes them feel too vulnerable. Okay, so let's leave that for now. What about an activity you enjoy that really you feel good and strong and, capable of doing? Think of a time when you were running or whatever sport they really enjoy, or with a group of people, as long as it's a positive, constructive kind of thing. Yeah. So,
Mhm.
okay. So is that helpful with this one? Some of the basic
Yeah,
instructions?
yeah, it is. Appreciate that. Got a number of questions. I'm kind of grouping them together. So I've got one that I think we can talk through a little bit of the customizations, and then I don't know if we want to maybe continue with the training and we can kind of look through, come back to questions later.
Okay.
You take
So
one more?
let me go, and I'll go into the other figures.
Sounds good. Yep.
Okay. Great questions, everybody. I'm really pleased. Helping me clarify. Okay, here we go. Okay, so some more ideas, a peaceful place. Okay, so nurturing figures. Some of what we're learning is one of the ways in which to not have a stressful, traumatic experience turn into trauma that's the person carries is our hugs, nurturing, connecting. All of that can really mitigate the trauma experience so that it doesn't lodge in as trauma in their body. So I think this is where the nurturing figures can be really helpful. So nurturing figures are figures, real or imaginary, that have a nurturing quality. They can be family members, if non-conflictual. Let's not pick somebody who the person has conflict with. That would be problematic. Often people will pick a parent and the parent hasn't been able to be very nurturing, but they feel disloyal if they don't choose them. It can be friends. It can be the therapist, meaning you, if you are working with the person. It can be their spouse, their partner, their lover. Again, if non-conflictual. It can be imaginary figures. They can be figures from movies, books, television. It can be spiritual figures. It can be animals. It can be their adult nurturing self. It can be that part of them that is nurturing, that knows how to nurture someone or something. And it can be the ideal mother. This is more what we use in attachment-focused EMDR. Now, what's key here that I want to emphasize is the client doesn't have to imagine the figure nurturing them. For example, if they imagine a mother bear, they don't have to imagine themselves as the cub receiving the nurturing. What we're doing here, if you think about it, is when you imagine a mother bear who's very loving and comforting, caring for her cub, you're activating those neural networks in yourself. So that's the comfort that is being activated inside. And then when we add bilateral simulation, it links in that resource and it's more accessible. Let me see if I have more. I'm going to give you some pictures of nurturing figures. So first one is like friendships. There's a dog and a cat together. There's someone getting a hug. Okay, so I will go back and I will guide you. Where is it? Here we are. So I'm going to remind you, the nurturing figure is a figure, real or imaginary, that has a nurturing quality. They're kind, they're caring, they're compassionate. So I'll guide you in this. So again, get yourself into a comfortable position, close your eyes and go inside. You might even imagine putting your thinking mind aside. Think of a figure or figures from your present or past that you associate with nurturing. This can be a person, an animal, real or imagined, a spiritual figure, or even someone from a movie or a book that has a nurturing quality. But just take a moment and see what comes up. Then when you imagine the figure, feel the nurturing quality in your body. When you have a strong felt sense of the nurturing quality of the figure, start the tapping. Just tap 6 to 12 times right, left, or as long as it feels positive. If it should go negative at all, stop right away. When it feels like enough, just stop and check in with yourself. How was that for you? How do you feel? What do you notice? If the nurturing quality is continuing to strengthen, you can do more bilateral stimulation if you wish. Continue the bilateral stimulation as long as you feel the figure and the nurturing quality strengthening and integrating. Okay, so how was that for you? Again, let's take some questions and some feedback about that.
I think overall, feedback saw a lot of comments about people feeling calmed, soothed, some expressing a little bit challenges setting on the image or setting on the scene. But yeah, warm, loved,
Great,
yeah,
great.
sleepy.
Sleepy. Sometimes sleepy means you're relaxing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yep.
I think, again, Ryan, I learned so much from the Innovations Conference in Anaheim.
Mhm.
This whole idea of the importance of being comforted and soothed and hugged after a traumatic experience. So it's making me think that if you can recall a time when you were hugged or something that elicits that feeling of being cared for in that way, if they can, that can also really bring the distress level down and help mitigate a trauma response afterwards.
Yeah.
If you're having trouble, some people may have trouble with this, you cast your net wide. So I'm looking for, anything in the media, anything people may have experienced before, spiritual resources. I'll throw out ideas that other people have used and see if that spurs their imagination or ideas. The other thing that I do is I typically like to get more than one under the categories of these figures. It's helpful. I mean, the more, the better, actually. If you can get a whole list of nurturing figures. Let's say they say, well, my grandmother, my dog, my best friend, my husband. Like these are the main ones I want to use. Okay. And then I'll say, okay, so imagine your dog and connect with a nurturing quality you feel from your dog. And then they get a good sense of the dog and how warm and cuddly and sweet their dog is. I'll say, okay, now tap. Tap as long as it feels positive. And then they tap, they go, okay, that feels great. Okay, so now imagine your husband and connect to the nurturing quality you feel from him in whatever way that shows up for you. It might be just seeing the person's face or their image. It may be remembering a good hug they had or kindness that the person has shown, or maybe like a little video clip that they're seeing of these things. And so just imagine that and then tap. And so you go through each one. If it should go negative, find out what happened. Say, okay, maybe we don't use your mom. Maybe she's too complicated and is bringing in some negative memories for you. That's okay. Let's just use the ones that we've got here, and they're working really well for you. Sometimes with the nurturing, it can bring up a feeling of deprivation, like they didn't have enough of that. And then just acknowledge that and just say, we're just, looking for representations of this. And often it can be like an animal, like a mother bear with her cub, or, a mother dog with her puppies, or something from a movie. Sometimes the spiritual resources are very comforting. They have something from their own tradition that they connect very strongly with. That can be very helpful for people. It can bring up grief because maybe their dog that they loved has passed away. And they'll say, well, do you think we can use your dog even though you have this grief? And they'll say, you know what, the grief is too big. I don't think I can use my dog. Or they'll say, yeah, I think so, but I don't want to, as soon as I start tapping, it brings up the grief. So maybe we don't tap, but we really can imagine your dog and the nurturing feeling that's connected to the dog. And then we'll use that.
Sure. I'm just kind of scanning through the chat. A number of people were sharing the calming feeling, the relaxing, but some are sharing also that the tapping, they found it challenging, distracting, having a hard time with it. So I just don't know if you have any thoughts on that when the
Yeah,
tapping.
sometimes it's odd. It kind of like, what is this? It's and it can pull them out a little bit. So this is where you experiment with it. Is the tapping helping or is it pulling you out? If it's not helping, just use imagery without it, and the imagery alone can help. And this is also something to do with your clients. What's helping? What's very interesting is that the tapping alone can calm the nervous system down. So you can tap somebody without imagery. And I think some of this may have to do with the rhythm, or it may have to do with the bilateral stimulation itself. But there's something about right, left stimulation that settles the nervous system down that, believe it or not, we're finding it works really well with animals too. If you have a distressed dog or a cat that's been really frightened by something and you just gently tap the sides of the animal's body, it calms the animal down. It works with horses. People have used this with horses who've been traumatized. So there's something about this that tapping alone can calm a person down, and animals. So I like the whole protocol. We don't need the whole protocol for calming down. So if imagery with it is not helpful, let's just try tapping without imagery and see how that does to just settle you down into your breathing, into your body.
And
So it's always about what's working, what isn't, and we can make adjustments.
and if the tapping isn't working for bilateral stimulation, do you have suggestions for other ways?
Yeah. So sometimes these little squishy balls, squeeze here, they can squeeze right and left, they can squeeze their feet, they can go like this with their fingers, they can gently tap. So you want the bilateral stimulation, the tapping, to be in the background. You don't want it to be foreground. So you don't want that to be a distraction. If it's a distraction, find a way to use it so that it doesn't become the focus of what you're doing. So that would be my suggestion. And there's just different ways to do this, barely touching. It's interesting. I've been doing this for so long. You watch how people do it. Some people barely touch. It's just a really, really light touch. And some people are like whacking. You're hearing the whack, 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 thinking, what are they doing? But that's what the person likes. And either they've asked for that for their therapist, or that's what they're doing themselves, and it's helping them maybe feel more in their bodies. So it's always adjusting what we do according to what the individual likes and prefers.
Thank you for that. Let's see. Do we want to take a question or do we want to move on?
Let's move on. I'll do protector figures. Protectors. Oops. Wait, where is it? Here it is. Okay. If there's more than one resource. So typically what I do with clients is I'll explain, let's work on nurturing figures. These are figures, real or imaginary, that have a nurturing quality. And it can be, a person someone from your past. It can be a spiritual figure. It can be an animal. We'll throw out different ideas. And then I'll make a list of them. And then we'll go through each one individually and we'll tap it in. So imagine your grandmother and connect with her nurturing quality. When you have a good sense of that, let me know. They nod their head and then I tap, or they tap. How was that? Oh, that was good. I could really feel more relaxed. I'm remembering happy memories of her. Okay, great. So now let's do the mother bear. Now imagine the mother bear and connect with her nurturing quality. When you have a good sense of that, let me know. They nod their head, then we start the bilateral stimulation, etc. And then we do the next one. So we'll do the whole list of them under nurturing, and then we have kind of a file of these nurturing figures. And then I see how it's going for them. Is this helping? Are they feeling more relaxed with this? So let me do this, some of them. And then we move on to protector figures. So protector figures are figures, real or imaginary, that have a protective quality. They can be the same as a nurturing figure. So let's say they chose a mother bear as their nurturing figure, as one of their figures for nurturing. And she's, cuddling with her cub, but for the protector, she's got her claws and her teeth bared, right? So she's manifesting this different energy. So it can be the same as a nurturing figure, but manifesting this protective energy. Again, it can be real or imaginary from their past or their present. It could be someone or something from books, movies, TV. So many, there's so much media that has protector figures. A lot of these action figures, the Marvel comics or, from Star Wars or any of these kinds of things. There's a lot of fantasy that have these protector figures. Animals it can be a big dog. It can be a wolf. It could be a fierce lion or a panther. And it can be the protective adult self, that part of yourself that is protective. So these are some examples of protectors. So let's do protector figures. So again, just take a moment and go inside yourself. Feel yourself sitting. A few moments to quiet your mind. Now think of a figure or figures from your present or past that you associate with protection. This can be a person, an animal, real or imagined, or a spiritual figure, or even someone from a book or a movie. Just see what comes. What's important here is that when you imagine the figure, you can feel the protective quality in your body. When you have a strong sense of the protective quality of the figure, start to tap. Tap as long as it feels like it's strengthening. Tap as long as it feels like it's strengthening and it's enough. Stop tapping if it should go negative at all. Okay, so how was that for you? Any questions? Anything you want to share?
Just seeing if anything coming in. Responding, feeling safe, relaxed. A little more difficult to connect with that one. Safe, secure, grounded. Some struggling to find a protector figure.
Mhm.
Peaceful. Calm. protected, powerful, empowered. And some also saying having a harder time finding a protector.
Yeah, so if this was clinical practice, you'd be working with your client to help them find it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking you through this pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So if it were, in clinical practice, we'd be taking more time.
Mm-hmm.
We'd be helping to identify that, and then we'd really, really light it up, each one, and then we tap it in. So if they're having difficulty, we would have caught that sooner.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sometimes when you start to tap, the imagery disappears. That's okay. What we're still wanting is the feeling state that's connected to the resource. So maybe don't try to hold on to the imagery. The imagery, in a way, is what is evoking the feeling state. So we're using the imagery to get into the feeling state. Sometimes the imagery is enhanced, sometimes it just disappears. But do you have that sense of what that figure is representing in a somatic way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. You spoke to some of the challenges that were coming up. Uh, some people just wanted clarification, making sure, is this safe for clients to use at home on their own?
Absolutely. So what's wonderful about this resource tapping, and that's one of the reasons I wrote the tapping in book,
Mm-hmm.
is because we were all using these kinds of things in our clinical practice with EMDR, and it was like a secret. The broader public didn't know about this. And so I wrote the tapping in book to get it out to a broader audience so that anybody can use this. You can use this with kids, with adults, they can use it in schools, you can use it in hospitals. There's so many applications, and our clients can use it on their own. And many of them do. They're tapping themselves before going to sleep at night, or when they get anxious, they can call up their resources. So it's a wonderful self-help technique. And what I want to say is this isn't for everyone. It's just a tool in your toolkit. For some people, it works so well for them. And one of the interesting things with trauma work is, for some people, just doing these resourcing, these resources with their clients, they don't need to do the trauma processing, because something about linking in those resources changes how the trauma is stored in the nervous system. So we're going in kind of a back door resourcing instead of going in the front door with the trauma. And for some people, it takes care of the trauma. So it doesn't go into the trauma that's stored in the body, creating PTSD symptoms. So
Yeah.
it's a wonderful intervention.
Mm-hmm. The question, how soon after the traumatic event is it safe to begin resource tapping? So,
Immediately.
mm,
So this is where what you find is we've got the cat under the bed people who just want to calm down. So let's give them ways to calm down. Let's go where they want to go anyway. Think of, a peaceful place, your favorite memories, being hugged by someone who loves you, all of these things that are going to calm them down. We're just going to go that direction. The other group, the can't stop talking about it group, can't stop talking about it. And so we're going to do a different intervention with them. So this is where right away, these are things you can do right after something that's happened, but you're going to follow the lead of the person you're with. What do they really want to do? What makes most sense to them? Now, for some people, you'll find they're so activated, they can't resource at all. And so then we do this other thing, that we do the tapping through the trauma, because they
mhm,
can't resource, they can't calm down at all. And so we're going to take them into moving this right out of their nervous system.
got it. Um, and then another question that has come up in terms of, when somebody's experiencing ongoing trauma, um, mention a traumatic event, how can you speak to that if the traumatic experience is ongoing?
In terms of resourcing,
Yeah, yeah.
it's really helpful.
Mhm,
And everything I'm giving you today can work for ongoing trauma. See, the thing about ongoing trauma is each event is in the past. So you've had a domestic violence situation happen, that one is over, even though they're still in the relationship. You can use these techniques to calm the person down and to process through it, because then that thing is in the past. It's not right now. And all of these things help get the left hemisphere online, because when you're traumatized, that goes dark, and all you've got is this activation in the right hemisphere. So we're helping to integrate and link up resources that then the person has available to do what they need to do.
Um,
So, yeah.
There was a question regarding adjusting for neurodivergent clients and clients with visual impairments. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, what's interesting is I've done this with people in my class who are blind or visually impaired. They have a great imagination, but it's different from those who um, have normal, what I would call normal sight, I guess. They can imagine, and then as they imagine it, you just use the word imagine or think of, it's activating those neural networks that they're needed. For anybody, this is what I'm going to say, there's no category for people. It's always adjusting and finding what works for the individual. It's drawing a picture. So using art along with this is fantastic. So draw a picture of your peaceful place, draw a picture of your nurturing figures, or find magazines that represent that have photographs that go with this, or go on the internet and look for images of nurturing figures, and then use those to help activate those neural networks having to do with nurturing and calming. Same with peaceful place. Look for images that represent that. So they can draw, they can look for pictures, and then you can use those things to evoke those states that you're wanting to cultivate more of and emphasize to calm them down.
Sure. Can you speak to, is there preparatory work that should be done before getting into resource tapping?
This is the preparatory work. You can do it right away.
Mhm.
I mean, this is stuff you can do with your kid. Your kid had a really bad day with
Mhm.
kids that were mean. You just teach them they can tap themselves, or you can tap them, or you can calm them down. And it's any of these imagery things and they work so well with kids. They love it.
Mhm.
And these things can be done in groups. So let me keep going. We'll do some more of these. Okay, gotta go back to share screen. Okay. So if the protective quality is continuing to strengthen, you can do more bilateral stimulation if you wish. And then you continue with the BLS as long as your client or you feels the figure and the quality strengthening and integrating. If there's more than one resource, then you bring up the next protector figure, bring that to mind, and then tap that in. And then you just repeat the process for each of those under the category of protectors. And then wise figures. These are figures, real or imaginary, that have a wise quality. They can be family, they can be ancestors, they can be spiritual figures, historical figures, figures from movies or books. It can be the inner advisor or inner wise self. And those are guided imageries that I have in several of my books that I borrowed from interactive guided imagery, Marty Rossman's work. This is where you guide your client to their peaceful place, and then you invite the inner advisor to arise out of that space. And as long as it's kind and compassionate and wise, and then you ask it its name, and it gives you its name, and then you tap that in, and then you ask it advice, and it answers, and ask it advice, and it answers, etc. So there's a whole script for that in my books. But just asking for wise figures that they associate with wisdom. And these are some examples. A wise indigenous woman, Gandhi. I don't remember who this other older man is, like an ancestor, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So it could be a religious figure that they have. It could be a family member, anything. And so, again, get more than one if you can. And then you ask them to go inside and think of a figure that represents wisdom. It could be real or imaginary. It can be someone they know. It can be someone from a movie or a book. Oh, people use Gandalf. They use Yoda. From some of these movies that they've seen. But they really are resonating with that sense of wisdom that the figure represents. So So we'll do wise figure. So I invite you again to close your eyes and go inside. Spend a few moments quieting your mind. Imagine a figure from your present or past that you associate with wisdom. This can be a person, it can be an animal, it can be a figure real or imagined, it can be a spiritual figure, or even someone from a movie or a book. See what comes up for you. So when you imagine this figure, feel the wise quality in your body. When you have a strong sense of the wise quality of the figure, start to tap. Tap. You can start with 6 to 12 times, right, left, or tap as long as it feels positive and it feels like it's continuing to integrate. Stop immediately if it should go into any kind of negative place. And then check in and see how you feel. What do you notice? Okay, so tell me what you noticed.
Coming back. Peaceful, empowered, smiled on my face, confident, calm, stress-free, lighter, safe, thankful,
Hmm.
capable. Wanted to practice it longer.
Yeah.
A lot of really positive feedback this time.
You know, it's almost sounding that the more we do this, the better you're getting at it. Like you're able to get into it faster and the imageries and the feeling states are coming more easily. This is often what we find. So our clients, it's like at first it's kind of awkward. What are you asking me to do? And the tapping's kind of weird. But then you get into a flow of it and it's going really well. And then you're kind of in a flow of it and it's working. So, and then they find it works so well for them that it's something they can use, something they can do. It's interesting too that some of the resources are going to be better for different people. So some of them, they're responding better to the nurturing figures and maybe the wise figures than the protectors. Or some people, because of the situation they were in, protection is what they really need. And so calling that up because they felt so powerless maybe is helpful. But I just find having this team kind of covers a lot of the bases that you need in life. You need nurturing, protection, and you need wisdom. So these are qualities that we're activating that are now within the individual that they can call up for themselves for calming. So anything else?
Yeah, I think there's been questions around, kind of throughout as far as how to go about this. So which resource, how do you introduce these different resources? Are you going through the series all at once? Are you like, how do you know which resource to bring in that's going to be right for the client?
Well, typically we'll go through all four of these
Mhm.
with everybody. It's kind of like I get a good baseline. So we'll say, so we'll go through, we'll do the peaceful place or alternatives, the nurturing, protective, and wise. And then the next one I'll do, let me make sure I've got this on here, is we'll do the team. And oh, let me keep going with this. I'll keep going with this. Um, yeah, I'm watching the time because we're right at break time too. So let me come back to that. I'm going to do more of the resourcing and give you some more ideas of what you might do according to different situations, right? And because that's a really good question here. So we're going to take a 15-minute break and then we'll come back and we'll do more on the resourcing.
Sounds good. All right.